Constitution of the Federal Government of the Desert Nation. Official copy ratified by the Fox administration and the Constitutional Committee, consisting of Fox, Gift, Bass, and Ukiel. Changes may be made before the server is released based on legitimate advice and/or counsel. Article 1. The Executive Branch. 1. Elections will be decided by a popular majority out of the present votes, being greater than 50% of the total votes submitted. 2. The President has the right to introduce states and authorize tribes by designating relevant territories and officially federalizing them and granting them powers of a singular state. 3. The powers of the is not able to lead due to any reasons. A. This new acting president holds all the powers that the president holds. 7. The president retains the right to introduce any individual into an advisory position and/or as the head of a department. 8. Departments have the right to enact any legislation or decision as they deem fit or are instructed to on their own unless specified otherwise by the Congress, the President, or another higher institution. 9. If an individual of any elected stature relinquishes their term, an immediate special election will be held within 7 days of the resignation. 10. If neither the President nor the Vice President may serve at a specified time, another department head or high-ranking government individual will be appointed by the two to serve during that specified time. 11. In the event that the President requests emergency powers to remove and/or banish individuals from the nation without trial, he must request these powers from the judicial branch, the Congress, and/or the people. A. These powers will be activated if at least 50% of the Federal Constitutional Court and at least 50% of the Congress approve. B. These powers can alternatively be activated by approval of at least 50% of the Federal Constitutional Court and at least 50% of the people present voting in a poll. Article 2. The Judicial Branch. 1. It is hereby stated that there are two main courts of the Desert Nation. A. The first is the Federal Court, and it will decide the constitutionality of laws, legislations, and other government actions by any member of the government. I. States, counties, cities, or other jurisdictions are permitted to have their own courts that determine local constitutionality if necessary. B. The second court is the Criminal Court and enforces all laws of the state, nation, or jurisdiction. I. They have sole jurisdiction of all criminal sentencing, with the exception that the sole jurisdiction of non-desert civilians and unrecognized immigrants is placed in the President's dictation. 2. A judge can be emplaced by the head of the congressional body of the relevant jurisdiction and approved by the President or head of that jurisdiction. 3. The following actions are considered crimes and are federally recognized with the following conditions. A. Any action aiming to secede from the nation, to disrupt the unity of the nation, and to cause civil war or any similar actions will be considered treason. The maximum penalty is banishment, and this stipulation cannot be amended. B. The taking of any item or amount of items without the owner's consent is considered theft. There is no minimum or maximum sentencing. C. The unwanted or unnecessary intentional killing of another is considered murder. The maximum penalty is undefined. The minimum penalty is 1 hour of imprisonment. 4. Every sentencing or decision can be appealed once. in a shorter direct trial between the defendant or government actor and the judge and/or jury. 5. The plaintiff can choose between a judge-only trial by themselves or with a jury of at least 3 members present. If there is no jury present, the judge decides innocence. If there is a jury present, the judge only determines sentencing severity and the jury decides innocence. 6. Jurors will be selected at random from the jurisdiction's territory and are expected to demonstrate their lack of bias. If they fail to demonstrate a lack of bias or demonstrate willingness to nullify and/or ignore the law, they will be removed from the jury. Article 3. Tribal Affairs. A tribal government may suspend certain aspects of the Constitution within their territory with the support of a congressional hearing and the President. 2. A tribe may not suspend any stipulations in Sections 1, 2, 4, and 8, nor in any way that would affect the function of the federal government itself or any outside government. 3. A tribe is only granted one representative in the Congress at maximum, but they are always granted that representative. 4. Tribes operate similarly to states with the same abilities to federate towns, hold their own elections for their representatives, and operate their own courts. However, their leaders do not have the same rights and powers that governors of states do, meaning they have no say in the adoption of amendments. 5. Tribes can be formed by any large group of at least 10 players that doesn't reside in a specific state or already federalized territory, which has formed its own unique culture apart from the majority of the desert nation, to the point at which it constitutes specific autonomy to either prevent conflict/tension or for the government to show courtesy/recognition of the respective ethnic or religious group. 6. Any aggressive and/or violent actions against a foreign nation, entity, or group by a militarized tribal force or so-called vigilante group that are not sanctioned by the desert nation's government and/or not against an enemy of the state are considered illegal, and participants will be tried for treason. 7. A tribe may have no more than 25 members before it is imperative that they federalize into a regular state, but they may not suspend any constitutional stipulations or relinquish any agreements with previously actively nullified stipulations. Article 4. The Rules of Commerce and Trade. 1. All domestic trade is under the jurisdiction of the Department of Commerce and Trade. A. This department may otherwise be known as the just Department of Commerce. 2. The Department of Commerce and Trade must always have a director and cannot be vacant for any extended period of time. 3. All future Department of Commerce and Trade directors can be assigned by the President, and if the Congress calls for it, they must be approved to lead by the Congress. 4. All international trade going into or from the desert nation is under the watch of the Department of Commerce, and no trade is allowed between the desert nation or a domestic company and a foreign entity without explicit exemption of the Director of the Department of Commerce and Trade and President or congressionally and/or presidentially recognized trade agreement. 5. This article solely affects the trade of items, not services, meaning that individuals may sell a service or wish to hire a service internationally without the requirement of contacting the government for permission to export or import the respective service. Article 5. The Federal Legislative Branch. 1. Every federalized state will be promised, at minimum, 2 representatives. 2. There will be 1 representative granted to a state per 15 civilians in that state. 3. Any congressional member may call for a civilian judgment election on any piece of legislation or federal action as long as it is within 10 real-life days of such an event and this action is approved by at least 10% of the Congress. 4. The President and/or departments will decide any decisions that are of urgency and those that are not yet defined by the legislator. 5. If any congressional member, member of government, or federal official of any kind is caught taking bribes or something similar to a bribe from a third party not involved with government or outside of a sanctioned compromise, that member of government will be tried for corruption. And if found guilty, this crime poses a maximum sentence of banishment and a minimum of permanent disbarment and permanent prohibition from taking or participating in any government and/or law enforcement role. 6. All congressmen will be re-elected every 2 months at the same time the president is elected. 7. In the event a Congress member steps down or dies, is inactive for excessive periods of time, or any other event that renders them out of action, an emergency election will be held to select someone to serve for the rest of the previous Congress member's term. 8. The Congress has the right to approve of trade pacts, not one-time trade, confirm alliances, and approve declarations of war. 9. The Congress can allocate saved funds to any government operation or program. 10. Congress can create laws dictating new crimes or limiting civilian powers as long as it does not interfere with Article 7. 11. A designation civilian or designation citizenship is defined as the individual or the title applied to an individual that actively lies in the designation, has not been exiled, and has been properly emancipated if the individual was once an immigrant. A. An immigrant is emancipated when they read the entire Constitution. I. The government may give the immigrant a small retention test to prove they read the Constitution. 12. All legislation introduced in any accord must have genuine rationale attached to it to justify its introduction. Article 6. Civilian self-determination and legislative effects. 1. The people, in a mass effort, may call for a vote to determine the outcome of any piece of legislation, to repeal a piece of legislation, any government action, to affirm a piece of legislation, or to impeach any public servant besides a representative of another district. A. A mass effort is defined as any large public movement towards action, preferably corroborated by a petition. B. Only constituents of an impeachable representative may vote on an impeachment speech. C. Any government individual, including the president, may be impeached if they have been found to have undermined democracy, the constitution, or the morality of the government and/or have committed a serious crime themselves. 2. If the people affirm legislation, it cannot be appealed by the Congress unless called for in a mass effort. If the people repeal a piece of legislation, it is entirely null and void. 4. The vote is determined by 3 results of a civilian's decision: for action, against action, and the non-present/abstention. If a civilian is not present, it is counted as an abstention and added to the total. Greater than 50% of participating civilians must approve of the relevant action in a vote. In the event that public referendum is used to make government decisions, rather than the use of Congress, inactive voters will not be counted. The action must still be approved by the Congress if less than 50% of all citizens vote. A. Civilian dictated decision votes can be started by department heads, sub-department heads, the vice president, and the president as long as it is permitted by the president. Article 7. Civilian Rights and Liberties. 1. Weapons of any type and shields are not allowed to be openly carried in a federal or government building. 2. Civilians may open carry weapons if they are non-threatening and peaceful. 3. Civilians must put away all weapons during any nearby law enforcement operation when a federal official is present or if requested to by a law enforcement officer, head of a department, or the president. 4. Civilians and their property may not be seized, searched, or violated in any way unless law enforcement and other government officials have reasonable suspicions of a crime or plot to commit a crime. A. Verbal commitment from a third party is reasonable. However, if that commitment is a lie, the so-called witness may be prosecuted for disruption of law enforcement operations with a maximum sentence of an hour in prison. 5. Civilians have the right to practice their own religion, as long as they do not impede on others unjustly or are demanded to cease intrusive or disruptive activities by federal officials and/or law enforcement. 6. Civilians have the right to protest, but they must not disturb law enforcement operations, diplomatic missions, or other important operations to the point that they may not function properly. A. Law enforcement operations in this specific case are defined as either the transfer of a convicted, sentenced, or arrested individual, or the active operation to arrest or investigate an individual, institution, civilian, immigrant, or other form of the accused. 7. Civilians have the right to free speech as long as it is not realistically racist, homophobic, in favor of Nazi or racist ideology groups, and does not promote drastic, real-life actions that could harm anyone or encourage real criminal actions. 8. Civilians have the right to free speech as long as it does not genuinely promote any criminal actions, such as murder or rioting or assault, or suggesting anything else that has been deemed illegal or criminal. A. If one takes criminal action because of something advised, not suggested, by another individual, the vocal advising individual is charged as an accessory to the relevant crime. 9. Civilians have the right to deny self-incrimination, but may not lie in court or else be held in contempt of court, which holds a maximum sentence of 1 hour in prison. 10. All forms of slavery and indentured servitude are prohibited when practiced on players. 10a. Villagers are not players, but it is advised that one may take care of their villagers humanely. 11. The government retains the right to tax civilians based on necessity and to tax businesses out of any courtesy. 12. Killing a villager is prohibited, besides the removal of nitwits. A. If an individual kills a villager that is not a nitwit, they must pay a fine to both the victim and the government for the costs of the villager and the prosecution, as well replace. Article 8. Additions to the Constitution and Amendments. 1. Any amendment to this very Constitution may be introduced by the legislature or the federal government. 2. To pass the amendments, they must have a 3/4 majority, or at least 75% of the vote, in favor. 3. Amendments must be signed off by the President. 4. Amendments of trade laws must be signed off by the Department of Commerce. 5. The amendments must be approved by more than 50% of the state's governors. 6. Tribal governments must negotiate with the Department of Tribal Affairs to dictate the effectiveness of the amendment on the tribal government unless the amendment solely affects the function of the federal government and doesn't affect the tribal group whatsoever. 7. Amendments may not approve of the eradication of any group or eliminate the effectiveness of any civilian right guaranteed by any current article. 8. Civilians are permitted to have a lawyer or other individual state their case in the court of law for them. Article 9. Recognition of national identity. 1. The desert nation takes the desert nation as its official name unless changed by the President. If the name is changed, any reference to the desert nation in legislation is still considered the same entity regardless of any name. Flags are interchangeable with any alternatives. The desert nation is hereby verbally committed to peace, prosperity, and justice for all its citizens. The desert nation is hereby verbally committed to world peace, the denial of fascism, rising in democratic states, and cooperation between the nation and her allies. The national motto is hereby "Glory be to the One Star," and is interchangeable with any alternative. Article 10. Further checks and balances. 1. If the President vetoes a law passed by the federal legislative branch, a veto override may occur if at least 2/3 of the attending legislative members vote to override, provided that at least 2/3 of the entire legislature is present. In the event that 2/3 of the legislature isn't present, the veto override is not permitted to pass. 2. The judicial branch may review federal laws for potential breaches of constitutional rights. A. Review process begins when a state court finds a potential constitutional issue and submits it to the federal judiciary. B. Federal courts may review only the law submitted for review. C. If the law is cleared, the decision is final unless a re-review is requested, which can occur only upon new evidence or legislative petition supported by at least 1/3 of the legislature. 3. Impeachment is handled by the people and for the people. A. Citizens participate through regional assemblies. B. For impeachment to succeed, 2/3 of participating civilians in each region must approve. 4. The President may nominate candidates to the judicial branch. A. Nominees must be approved by at least 1/3 of the legislature to take office. B. If a nominee fails to gain approval after 3 consecutive attempts, the legislature assumes the responsibility to appoint a candidate. 5. The President contains the right to pardon criminal offenses relating to federal issues. They cannot pardon themselves. Pardons are not allowed to overturn impeachment decisions by the people.